G'day, it's Widow here. I haven't put a video up for a while, so I thought I'd make one about global warming, albeit that's probably a fair bit away from any of the previous videos I've put up. One thing I suppose it does have in common is the the deceit our government, federal government, showed towards us. Basically the reason I put this video up is because there's a lot of people that I know that are friends, and people come to rather large arguments about global warming and so on and so on. Basically the reason why I put this video up is I don't know, I mean, basically I'm not a weather scientist, I don't even claim to be, but I'm also a person that was born with a thing between my ears called a brain, which is what we use to come to conclusion. I'm certainly qualified in being able to use the logic. That's really basically what I need. I did live in New Zealand for a while, so I have actually been over to this place, so I'm going to zoom in on this now. This, my friend, is Franz Josef Glacier, which is in the South Island, west coast of the South Island of New Zealand. And I'm going to zoom in now on the face of this glacier down here. I will try as best as I can to do this the way and quickly, so you can see what's going on here. Now we come down to the face of this glacier here. I am not stupid, and nor are you. Can you see this here? Can you see the manipulation here of the video? Because I can. It's actually been manipulated on the face of this glacier. It looks like it anyway. I don't know. But anyway, it has melted back a bit. The reason why I put this up here was I did, like I said, live in New Zealand, so I was lucky enough to come over here and visit this place. And you'll note that where you park your cars is way down here. This has been visited by Europeans for many, many years. If I zoom back out again, you'll see why. It's because it was extremely close to the coast. As you can see, this is the coast of the South Island here, and you could make your way up this valley here. So it was really quite accessible and was visited for many, many years. The reason I mention that is that going down this valley, as you park your car here and walk down through here, there are rocks where they've had the face of the glacier, from about I think it's recorded from, I think about mid-1800s actually. I certainly recall dates in the 1800 range and early 1900s, and this has been receding from here to areas down here, which is where the face of this glacier was, all the way back up to here, which is where it was when I was here last. I would say that if I zoomed in on this, it does look a bit unusual there, but it's possible that it hasn't been manipulated, I suppose. It does look a bit odd, doesn't it? Like, I mean, can you see that flat bit there? It sort of just looks like it's been cut and pasted in there. I don't know. I mean, it's let's see if we can't zoom right in here, because if it's been cut and pasted, which is what I suspect, I would suspect it does look like that, doesn't it? If you look here, this part of this here where it's supposed to be running out of from underneath this ice, it doesn't look right, does it? It doesn't look like the way it's supposed to. I'll just see if there's an image there on that one. That's actually probably one of these little side streams. But it does look odd there. Do you see what I mean? There's no rapid running here. There's no ice locked in this river creating, this looks to me like this has just been cut and pasted in here. That's the reason I say that, is down here is where you get the river running with the ice in it, which is what it looks like because I've been there. So it looks all normal till you get to about here, and then it goes into this bed here. So I don't know, that looks pretty odd to me. It does not look like that is the ridged edge. I don't know if anybody else out there has got some more recent photos you could show me that. Okay, so as I said, we've established the fact that this has been obviously melting, and from back here 1850 and all that area around here, that the 150 years of melting has put this thing from about here to this part of the valley here. Certainly when I was there was 30 years ago. I would, if I zoomed in on this location here and said to you where I would think that would be, I would think that would have been around this area here. It's not a whole lot different. It was pretty much in this area. Now I'm going to flick over on another picture now, and I'll show you something just to show you that I have been there. Those of you who know me know this person, because it's our dad, and that was Dad and Mum come over for a holiday there, as you can see. Let's just see if I can't drag that down a bit. Yeah, there. It's a bit deceptive there, because you can see what I meant by that other image where I said there doesn't look to be any ice in the river, because I can tell you now, you get big chunks of ice coming down in this river. They're all the way down here, and we were there in the middle of summer. You can see there that actually is rather deceptive, in that it looks like Dad is sort of leaning against this glacier. He isn't, he's on a rock, and we are up the valley quite a way. I will show you with the next photo here. Hang on a minute. In this one, I'll zoom right in here now. Well, like I said, we're up the valley in that photo. This gives you an idea how much ice is just in this one glacier, because there are people standing right here. Okay, and when you zoom out, you'll see just how much ice is in that thing. And like I said, as you can see here, this is all the ice in the river. Now it is possible that this chunk of ice here is probably melted, this bit here that you can see, and it doesn't look a whole lot different, you know, back further up. I think that's that little waterfall there. Alright, see this one here coming down there? I think if we went back here to this other picture and zoom in here, you'll find it's this one here, that little one there. See that? That waterfall coming down there is probably where this one is here. So it's probably this chunk of ice melted here. It's 30 years ago, okay? Because that's how long ago this was. I was in my early 20s. I think I could probably go and have a look at that file and have a look at what date it was, but I know when I was there it was about 1980 to about 86 from memory. Now I want to show you one other thing, and just to give you an indication that I have actually been there and how long ago, you only got to look at that and go and have a look at my Facebook channel or YouTube. Excuse me, my YouTube channel, and you can see that that was quite some time back. I'm a hell of a lot grayer. I'm probably just as fat, I guess, but anyway, as you can see there, I definitely was in New Zealand, and right at that Fox Glacier there. The other thing I wanted to discuss with you is the following. If in actual fact we get to this point now and we say, okay, well, this thing has been melting for 100 years. It's actually been melting for a hell of a lot longer than that. The reason this ice and whatnot of this glacier was stacked all the way down here in 1800. The reason for that is because it was the remnant of the last ice age. These bloody things are going to melt. So if we're going to sit here and look at that Dole fella who come down here pumping his global warming rubbish, this thing was melting 200 years ago. It's been melting for probably close to 10,000 years. I would suspect that the probably only time it wasn't would have been when, well, I know from having watched some documentaries about you know, reasonably recent catastrophes, that there is suspected of being a 10-year period 10 years of winter in England that was recorded in about 640. I would suspect that that might have been the only time this thing ever grew, but I can assure you these glaciers that were used by Dole were a stupid thing to use as a thing of global warming. These things have melted and been melting for 100, 10,000 years. The only reason there's anything left is they are in places where it's cooler, and like I said, in here you'll find that this glacier, and the reason this is here is it is still fed. Look at the top of up here. This is why this is still fed. Now look at when I move out here, what are we looking at? Here, look at this here, look here, up here. You're getting to where it's the highest part in this country. And what happens, glaciers don't grow down here in the valley, they grow on the top of a mountain. From the compacted snow and ice here, it just gets compacted and compacted and compacted, and it runs right down this valley here, and that's what creates a glacier. Now, the fact that it's still there is there's a reason for it. It's because it's not bloody hot enough for it to melt. For that valley here, the Franz Josef Glacier Valley here, what is going to make this thing not melt is that when it's it's 0 degrees or less. Right? So it's 0 degrees here, and it's the only way that this thing can stop melting, because that's what bloody melts ice. It's the temperature. It's not bloody whether you've got 300 parts per million or 400 parts per million in CO2 in the atmosphere, because this was melting in the middle of last century. For it to melt in the middle of last century, when your CO2 was more likely well under 300 parts per million, it still melted. You can throw every bloody tax you want at this thing, this ice is still going to melt. Because the only reason it is melting is the temperature. To stop it melting, you do not have to drop the world temperature by 1.2 degrees or 2 degrees. You have to drop it to 20. The daytime temperature in this valley here, in the middle of summer, down here in summer, is 20 degrees. It's not freaking 0. That's why this thing melts. It's going to keep melting too. Every bit of ice that has not been there before the last ice age, well, it's going to melt. That's what's going to happen. Now let's discuss one other part on this globe of ours. I'll zoom out and you can remember where all this is. Do you remember going to school? Do you remember going to school? Because I'm going to enlighten you on one or two things. Okay, so we see our globe. We know full well that this down here was probably well and truly affected by the last ice age. I would say you would have to look at Tassie and say, okay, well, does Tasmania have any land that would appear to be cut by, glaciers? There probably is some places down there that probably are. I'm not 100%. I haven't actually gone right through Tasmania. I would imagine there's probably some areas there that would indicate that's the case. Certainly, if I go to the bottom of New Zealand, over here, certainly, as you can see, all of these, the fjordland has all been carved with glaciers. And you might say, well, that's odd, because why is it that we've got no glaciers in here anymore, you know? Where are all our glaciers that cut these big valleys here? Look, these are huge. These are 1,000 feet deep and 3,000 straight up out of the water. I know, I've been there. They go straight up out of the water. Some of the cliff faces there are 1,500 feet straight up, and you're in 1,000 foot of water to do it. So this was all cut by glacier, but all the glaciers are gone. Why? Because this melt of ice has come in underneath the ice, taken it all away. The reason the Franz Josef and Fox Glacier up here have not melted totally, I would suspect, is because number one, they are still to a degree getting fed from the plain of snow that's up at the top of the mountain. But more importantly so, it's at the highest peak of the New Zealand, because this is all Mount Cook National Park in here. It is the highest part of the country. Therefore it remains very cold. You'll also find, if you look at the angle the Franz Josef Glacier is at, and looking north, east-west is like this, so it doesn't get a lot of sun in here during the winter or summer months anyway, which is another reason. That's the Franz Josef Glacier, and if I zoom in on this one here, this is the Fox Glacier in here, into this valley. It's another one that I've also gone and looked at. You'll see it's fed from the same, pretty much the same area. Both these glaciers down here, and you'll also see another one down here as well. And this one here. There's another glacier in here. And these are fed. Here's another one there. I would think that that would be the remnants of what would have been a rather large glacier at one point, cutting right down into this valley here. You can see the other one here. This is what happens, they melt. They melt. And the reason they melt is they, most of them are remnant of the last ice age. So that's just it, they're going to melt, that's the reality. But I want to show you something else. Let's zoom back out and we'll go have a look at this South Pole they tell us is going to melt, eh? And let's use some common sense. And as you know, I could go online, so you know I know that that glacier has been melting all the time for 100 years, or at least 100 that's been recorded, 150 years in that valley. 150 to, it's almost close to 200 years. Like I said, it was mid-1800s where they started writing on the rocks. Yet it still melts. So then we've got to say to ourselves, well, why is the government pushing this global warming issue if in actual fact, you know, has the global, you know, are our temperatures any hotter now than what they were a year ago, or 10 years ago, or 50 years ago, 100 years ago? It's really probably irrelevant. Like I said, you've only got 1.5 degrees you're going to change your world temperature by. You cannot stop those things melting. They're melting because it's 20 degrees in summertime where they are. That's why it melts. It's not because it's 300 parts or 400 parts per million, because we can go back here. Now I could, as you know, we can go online and go and look at all these figures, and I might hit a website that one of these official global warming figures. That's one of the ones that push all of these things that we've got to do to stop the temperature of the Earth increasing by 1.5 degrees. The reality of that situation must be considered. That if I go and look at facts and figures on the internet, I could hit one and yeah, sure, that'll tell me, oh, the average temperature of the planet has increased by 1.5% due to CO2 in the atmosphere, and I can look at their figures, and that organisation may very well be the recipient of a $10 million government grant, 1 million of which would go into the CEO's wage or pay packet, and wonder whether or not those figures are going to be manipulated. Well, they very well could be, couldn't they? I then go back and say, okay, well look, I could go and look at another lot of figures and go looking somewhere else, and then I might get somebody and a whole bunch of other figures that are pro oil or pro coal, and of course those figures will be, whether they'll be manipulated, they could very well could be. So what I'm getting at here is we've got to get to a point of where you've got to say, okay, well, I'm not a climate expert, what do I know? And like I've already showed you, the 300 parts or under 300 parts per million did not make any difference in 1850. The ice melts. We are going to have every bit of ice melt if it is in a valley that is 20 degrees above zero, because zero is where water freezes. Seems that we've forgotten that. Some other thing we've forgotten is we're now sitting here looking at Antarctica. Now, I went to school, I'm sure you did, and I'm sure you remember being told this bloody place is in the bloody dark 6 months of the year. It is dark. It is freezing bloody cold. It is minus 100 plus, and you're telling me this thing's going to melt? Like when? It's already thawed and had the ability to thaw out for the last 10,000 years. Not 10 days, not 10 years, 10,000 years this thing has been melting for. Do you think maybe it got to the point of where there's not going to be anything melt off it anymore? Gee, bloody hell, because a politician tells you this is going to melt and we're going to introduce all these new laws. My God. Have we forgot to think for ourselves? I just sit here in amazement. Anyway, back to Antarctica. So it's covered in ice and snow and in the dark for 6 months of the year. The time, I'll rotate this just in case you forgot the shape of the planet, unless you're one of those flat earthers out there. I'll zoom out. It's down the bottom of the planet here, right? So therefore, wintertime, it tilts this way. It gets no sun. Summertime, tilted this way, it starts to get sun, but it does not have sun that travels east to west across the bloody thing this way. It is down here. It travels along the edges. It's not like it's sitting up in the middle. Summertime is not going to melt this. It's absolutely bloody stupid that we have allowed ourselves to be manipulated by a bunch of lying mongrels, which is what we're doing. Now let's discuss just exactly what changes have happened. Because, like I said, well, I probably didn't say at the start, which I should have, global warming is more about the first word, not the second word. It's the global aspect of it, and we'll discuss that right now. The other area of concern, like I said, as far as I can see, Antarctica has well and truly had more than enough time to freeze. The other main issue is the ice on Greenland. Once again, it is a situation where a degree or 1 or 2 of temperature is not going to make these things melt. Rivers and oceans are going to rise by 40 feet in 10 minutes or 10 years or whatever. This thing here has been here since the last ice age, so once again we are talking 10,000 years of melt already. 10,000 years of melting already. Now remember that this is 10,000 years of melting. I'm just moving the camera, and let's really stop and think about 10,000 years of melting. So here we are, 10,000 years of melting, and this is what is left. Be aware that that is the reality here. This is what is left after 10,000 years of melting. 10,000, not, like I said, a couple of days. This has been here for a long time, ever since the last ice age. Once again, it is one of those things, as like the South Pole. Any ice anywhere on this thing that is above freezing, so if you've got valleys there where you've got 10 degrees, they're going to melt. It will be slow. And their ability to tell you to panic is pathetic, absolutely pathetically stupid. It's taken 10,000 years to get to this point. Why do you think this thing's going to go like that in the next 5? What a bloody stupid thing when you've got a degree, a temperature of a degree or 2. Seriously, stop and ponder the vast forests in both, well, South America, here, Africa. Hundreds of years ago, had nobody in them other than the natives that lived there. There were no cars, there was nothing. In fact, if you actually even went back only 200 years and looked at the southern hemisphere, and like you know, and if you don't know, that the global weather patterns stay to the south of the equator and to the north of the equator, and the hemispheric, or the way the world works, that's pretty much what happens. The weather patterns of the southern hemisphere stay in the southern hemisphere. It's because the equator heats up, and that's what drives the weather patterns in our globe. This thing, like I said, has been here for 10,000 years. Do you really seriously think it's going to melt over the next 20 or 30? Seriously. Now I want to say one other thing. Well, I did live in New Zealand. It did snow there one winter. The snow went to the high tide mark at the beach. It was only one night it snowed. For the next 10 days or fortnight at least, every day was a very, very sunny day with not one cloud in the sky. The snow happened and the fall happened the last night of a big storm. It was clear days for 2 weeks with no rain, with no more snow, and a fortnight later with degrees of temperatures in 12 to 15 degrees, and this is one couple of inches of snowfall. It didn't get to about anything above 15 degrees for the next week, but we got severe frost because it was clear. We were still going down the sandhills 2 weeks later, sliding down on the ice, on the snow, on the beach. And most of it had melted, but not all of it. This is just one fall of snow. They're trying to tell you this thing is going to melt in like 30 years? What a dead set joke. Honestly, what a bunch of lying mongrels we've got running this place. Now let's discuss what has actually happened since. Okay, like I said, global warming. Well, I know one thing for sure. Where I live, just across the way here, there was a whole load of blocks of land that were for sale. You know what happened? Because of global warming and all our local councils increasing the 1 in 100 flood level, all of the oceanside land or riverside land or wherever is now unobtainable by somebody who hasn't got a lot of money, quite frankly, because the insurance companies pulled the insurance on anything in a 1 in 100, then their banks stopped financing them, and you might think I'm having you on, but I'm living across from an estate that was all put into 1 in 100 with that, and there's nobody buying the blocks because they can't get the finance to do it. That's just one thing, but by far the most reason for the global warming myth portrayed by the Western governments of this world of ours, one of which is running our show, is totally deceitful, and it is purely and simply to move most of the energy resources within Western countries was created. It was all not originally. It was all in our country. It was all paid for by us taxpayers, and it was government owned. You'll find that that's actually what's going on here. It's all to do with getting all of the energies for our own country all into private hands, and my God, wait till that happens. And you reckon your electricity bills are expensive now? They're going to kill us off well and truly. Well, freeze to death of these buggers running the place, but that's essentially why. It's all to do with the world power grid and putting it all into private enterprise in the Western countries. That's exactly what it's about. You only have to go and look at what the all our governments and the supposed things to repair it, their carbon footprint. You know, it's all about global food control, and you wait, they'll start putting these carbon footprints and these more and more limitation on farmers to pull a profit. They're flat out making a profit now. They've given no protection whatsoever. A farmer getting 40 cents for a litre of milk is bloody pathetic. This is what global warming is about. Global warming is about bringing a new lot of taxes in and making them smaller and medium-sized businesses start talking about carbon footprints with them, increasing their business costs. At the meanwhile, they turn around and give multinational huge businesses, the tax breaks do not fall into the category of the smaller businesses, so therefore they're not even on the same playing field, and they try to compete with these multinationals. That's what it's about. The whole thing is a scam. Pretty much everything the government do these days, it's long gone that they actually started telling the truth. That's for one thing. This is absolutely pathetic. But anyway, so like I said, you can go and look at all these things, go and really seriously ponder. Use some common sense here, folks, because seriously, the ice on this joint here, the ice has been on this place here for 10,000 years. And they've got you believing that this and this big chunk of ice here, right down here, and this is going to melt. It's been there for 10,000 years. Why should it all of a sudden melt in the next 4 or 5 or 40? What, you're going to tell me we're going to increase the global... Oh mate, honestly, it's just a load of rubbish. How many times do you hear, with all of this global warming rubbish, just exactly how many times do you hear the word oil uttered? Because you never hear it, ever. It's coal. Coal, 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 coal. That's what it's about. It's all about, I'll tell you what it's about. It's about these bastards, these rich bastards, not only owning our electricity supply, privatisation right across the Western society, it's actually more about global food control too. That's why they're talking about carbon footprints that farmers leave. It's time to knock these bastards out of the park, if you ask me. They're a bunch of lying scumbag dogs, and we need to get rid of them, a whole lot of them. In fact, I suspect that I don't think we've got courage on anybody, on either our major parties. Because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm just one that believes steel and concrete buildings do not turn to dust in mid-air, and until such time as I see a federal government or any of my politicians in any parliament actually stand up and start doing something. I know people have stood up in state parliament and said that was what was going on, but I'm afraid that everybody in our federal parliament are a bunch of gutless mongrels. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Like I said, I'm not a climate scientist, but I don't have to be. I've got experience. I've got 60 years experience of living on this planet. I've got 60 years of experience of watching freaking ice melt. I know it melts when it gets hotter than about 5 degrees. Somewhere between 5 and 10. And you ain't gonna drop this temperature of this globe to put that ice all back where it was. We're gonna have an ice age, mate. We'll all die. So that's the alternative. I'd rather stick with what we've got. Have a good day. I'll see you later. Bye.